longer, I suggest that we start. Let me start by saying a good morning, welcome, colleagues and friends. We're happy to welcome you to the ODA Learning Series, co-organized by OECD and UNDP's Istanbul Regional Hub. Let me introduce myself to you first. Some of you already know me. I'm Berna Bayazıt, working in the partnerships team of ARBEC. We're providing partnership support on various topics to our country offices and our emerging donor partners, particularly on their development cooperation and ODA practices. Our ODA Learning Series is actually part of this service line, moved to an online format last year with the global pandemic's impact, and also in partnership with OECD. This year, in 2021, our Emerging Donors series is actually hosted by, each of them are actually hosted by our partners, our country emerging donor partners. And last one being on innovation in development cooperation, hosted by Poland, on volunteerism with Russian Federation, on sustainable finance with Slovakia, on digitalization with Czech Republic. So here today's session is brought to you by our partners from Turkey, particularly the Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TİKA. The topic is actually selected as an increasingly relevant one for the development community as the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus. It was introduced and elaborated further in the 2016 World Humanitarian Summit, and since then it's actually explored further, also with recommendations prepared by OECD and many other partners, which was also shared with you in the background note. It's extremely relevant because the world has been grappling with protracted crises everywhere, calling for humanitarian emergency response coupled with recovery and resilience efforts to both prevent such crises and reduce the impact of these. So we think, therefore, it's actually a great opportunity to focus on this topic with our partners and hear experiences from the field and policymakers first about their first-hand experience. Let me go through the agenda a bit. We'll first have the Turkish TİKA to share their experiences on how they work with their local partners in the development cooperation, and how they also link the humanitarian aspect with capacity building at the local level. And then we will hear from UNDP Turkey on the Regional Refugee and Resilience Plan, which actually is a framework for such a nexus, bringing together the humanitarian refugee angle with the development component, the resilience component. And this will be followed by a presentation from JICA, Japan being one of the key DAC donors, strongly emphasizing the nexus in its work. And finally, we will have, again, reflections and first-hand experience from Oxfam in Iraq. Most of you know, I guess, Oxfam, a renowned international NGO, on their experience and how they also link the capacity building with the humanitarian work. These presentations will be short presentations of about 10 minutes. Then we will continue with some question and answer session. You can write your questions as they come in the chat box. So we will have some time, about 20 minutes, to go back and ask our presenters, speakers, to respond to those questions. As you speak, please think of your experiences in the interaction session as well. So before moving on, let me invite Mr. Uğur Tanyeli for the opening remarks on behalf of Turkish TİKA. He is the head of External Relations and Partnerships Department of Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TİKA. He's with the agency since 2011 and is the head of department for about 3-4 years, with an extensive experience both in the planning, policymaking, and field side of Turkey's quite significant development cooperation. So without further ado, let me pass it on to Uğur Bey, to you for the opening remarks, and thanking Tika and the Turkish partners to lead on the organization of this event. Thank you, and over to you, Uğur Bey.
Thank you, Berna Hanım. I would like to, good morning, everyone. I would like to begin with extending my sincere thanks to UNDP Istanbul Regional Hub for organizing this ODA Learning Series. We have been actively engaging that platform. Before pandemic, I think 2019, we have gathered together in Istanbul. We have organized this learning series face-to-face, as far as I remember. And I also appreciate giving us this opportunity to lead today's discussion on a timely and important topic at the intersection of humanitarian development and peace efforts. I would like to also express my warmest greetings to the distinguished panelists and participants, each of whom has participated from different geographies to share their experience and insights with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, as I start, I would like to say that today, the impacts of the COVID pandemic are compounding the existing humanitarian challenges globally, and living with many countries vulnerable to the impacts of the pandemic, the countries which have been experienced already the humanitarian crisis. Unfortunately, it has implications on the ODA and also humanitarian flows. Due to the pandemic, the global international humanitarian assistance declined in 2019 for the first time since 2012. From $29 billion to $29 billion from $31 billion in 2018. On the other hand, according to the Global Humanitarian Assistance Report, the 60% of the world population is now in the countries who has experienced the humanitarian crisis. In this sense, as global partners, we need to gear up our efforts to work together. And as TICA, we value partnership in our humanitarian and development cooperation at the core of our operations. We have become a global actor in development cooperation and humanitarian assistance, not only with global acclaimed success story of Turkey to Syria and Somalia, but also we have been also engaged in post-Yugoslavia conflict recovery in 1990s, the crisis in Afghanistan, Palestine, Sudan since 2000s. And also we have been an essential partner in Libya, Iraq, in Myanmar crisis recently. These zones, these regions are already, we recall them as the protracted crisis zones. The Turkey's success in development assistance is not a short-lived success, but a long-lasting one that will carry on. Turkey is the leader in the world in terms of both the committing development assistance as a percentage of its national income and in the amount of humanitarian aid committed as percentage of its national income, recorded as 1.15%. And the total Turkish development assistance for 2019 has already recorded as $9.4 billion. Now it has been more than 10 years that Syrian war has started. From the beginning of the Syrian crisis, Turkish humanitarian response has been very unique. Turkey is now the world's largest refugee hosting country with more than 4 million Syrian refugees, but not only the Syrian refugees, but all the refugees coming from the east to west. Turkey has developed a multifold strategy to help Syrians, not only inside the Syria and in Turkey, but also it helped the Syrian refugees in Lebanon and Jordan and beyond its border. On the other hand, during the 2011 famine in Somalia, Turkey is the first country who had opened its embassy in Mogadishu and all the Turkish public institutions and the voluntary institutions has engaged in large humanitarian campaign to Somalia, and maybe we can say that we have changed the destiny of the Somalia, because after Turkey, all the international community it sparked their interest and attention to Somalia, and Somalia has become more stronger. Unlike many donors, Turkey is able to continue carry on development and humanitarian assistance directly and on the ground in crisis-stricken geographies such as Iraq, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Libya, and those traits of Turkish development and humanitarian assistance with responsible and value-fair aid enables Turkey as a reliable and responsible development actor in the eyes of the people in need. Ladies and gentlemen, when I'm concluding my remarks, I would like to also say that the humanitarian and development actions converge around the need to prevent, prepare for, and respond to crisis, especially for the most vulnerable and at-risk populations. There is a need for the context-specific and people-centered approach to the implementations process. As part of this effort, very first Humanitarian Summit in Istanbul in 2016 was organized in Istanbul and Turkey, and produced an important document such as Agenda for Change for the stakeholder, and highlighted the more joined up, coherent programming among humanitarian development and peace actors. This nexus understanding is also streamlined later by its connection to central process of United Nations reform agenda, and also inspired many actors to design and implement better. We remain ready as TICA to cooperate with all stakeholders in order to end any humanitarian suffering, for we see everywhere, and also we value knowledge exchange in this kind of mediums. I'm sure that the exchange from the panelists today will help us to understand how humanitarian development peace actors could help to translate these triple nexus into guidance that can be put in practice better. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish you good luck, and we will be looking forward to hear the panelists. Thank you very much, Berna.
Thank you, Urbey, for the remarks, and also with examples from around the world of Turkey. So this actually leads me to the next speaker from TICA. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Emre Yüksek, who is a senior specialist in TICA's Department of External Relations and Partnerships. So he has been in TICA since 2016 in various capacities, and both in the field and headquarters. So he will be talking about sustaining alliances between humanitarian and development partners, and especially with reflections from the field. So over to you, Emre Bey. You have about 10 minutes. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Berna Hanım. I think today we will able to create a good medium of interaction. So, good morning, everyone. I wanted to start today's discussion with this quote from one of the inspiring authors. As we professionals come across many concepts during our work, and I believe language matters for self-reflection, I hope we will create a medium for clarity instead of space of ambiguity. And also, instead of adding new buzzwords and fuzzy phrases today in our development speak, we will try to unpack the nexus concept. So we recognize that development cooperation covers a broad group of actors that operate in different ways and have different roles. And the development approaches will differ depending on the context. In particular, for Nexus approach, I will focus today the operationalization side and focus three key partner groups in our collaboration and also three key areas with an emphasis on localization. On my part, I will go through my presentation on the following overview. I will introduce the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus, a history, the core 4 and 5. Then I will go to the challenges, and then I will talk about the architecture for alliances, how we put the localization in practice. Then I will go for some sectoral insights on health, education, and sustainable livelihoods. And I will finalize my presentation with the lessons learned and how can we deliver better. So the Nexus concept is not new. Actually, it has been proposed many times under many different names, especially in the early 1990s, linking relief and rehabilitation and development approaches. But they were still framed as working in silos approach. So some actors also have considered adding other elements like migration, human rights, security, and stabilization. But since the concept's proposal, the international community has been struggling how to operationalize it. So the emergence of the triple nexus concept came to prominence after a series of multilateral summits. The important one was, as was highlighted, the World Humanitarian Summit of 2016. And it was aimed to build a policy consensus around the need to strengthen synergies between the humanitarian development and peace actions. So as we see in the definition, nexus refers to the interlinkages between humanitarian development and peace actions, and strategic partnerships of actors from humanitarian assistance, development cooperation, and peace building are essential to secure successful implementation of the nexus. And in this definition, we highlight the collective outcomes, comparative advantage of the groups and institutions, and joined up efforts. And in the very concise definition of OECD refers a framework of action, prevention always, development wherever possible, and humanitarian action when necessary. So among these framework, I want to move on the Agenda for Humanity. After the World Humanitarian Summit, Agenda for Change came with 5 core responsibilities, as you see in the slide, and 24 transformations under the Charter. Out of these core responsibilities, core 4 work differently to a need, and core 5 to invest in humanity offers a kind of a operationalization side of the nexus. So these principles are guide action, set standards, which practice aspires and is later measured subject to contextual interpretation and application by different actors in different settings. So let me to move on the challenges, how we operationalize the nexus approach. So placing humanitarian principles and development partners sometimes be at the crossroads and face trade-offs due to the political dynamics. So before the lessons learned, I will shortly address the challenges we face on the ground and question why we need nexus approach. While progress has been made in identifying collective outcomes, slowed working remains a fundamental challenge, practically speaking, for many development actors, pushing them to fragmentation in coherence and unpredictability. And we see these major dilemmas on the ground. And the first one is the greatest obstacle was the scale and the rising complexity of the humanitarian needs. In this context, stakeholders reported the funding and capacity gaps were the top 2 challenges they faced. The second one is the tyranny of urgency, and we face this trade-off with the sustainable outcomes. And recent evidence demonstrates that the recovery from crisis usually takes several years. Global actors often subordinate the process of working towards long-term recovery objectives and prioritize short-term life-saving objectives. And the third one is the prioritizing risk versus institution building investments, where global actors fail to catch up with the local decision-making in the immediate aftermath. Opportunities can be lost to influence longer-term recovery. And for local actors to engage meaningfully with the global actors, they need time and more voice to communicate their recovery plans, and global actors need an appropriate framework to provide resources. And finally, another element of the humanitarian enabling environment that can work against local global partnerships is the process of need assessment and linking with them the available capacity. The current funding system reinforces the short-term humanitarian response paradigm and a short window for needs assessments and capacities that will lay the foundations of resilience building. So I will move to how we can build a good architecture for alliances. So I want to highlight the term for localization, and I gave the definition here in my slide. And localization entails seeking the active engagement of communities, national, regional, and local authorities and civil society in order to ensure that interventions strengthen and support the existing initiatives and ways of working in view of achieving independence from aid. As part of its peace-building efforts, Turkey has mediated between various parties in the ongoing conflict in Somalia, Sudan, Philippines, Afghanistan, and Myanmar. And Turkey emerged as a capable actor during its peace-building initiative. And the field's experience highlighted the importance of engagement with local government institutions, central to good development practice, and supporting civil initiatives through the NGOs. This can enable an effective presence in crisis settings and therefore to avoid the creation of parallel systems. So as observed in our work in Somalia, Sudan, and Afghanistan, it can leverage the strong relationships with local governments and deliver at scale can be a game-changing on the local level. In particular, partnerships with local governments through local governance programs have been an important entry point for development actors in crisis-affected regions. And in this regard, supporting municipalities while also enhancing coordination among local actors when carried out in a conflict-sensitive manner can build trust and enable safe spaces to implement projects. And this, instead of creating parallel structures, we help the subnational authorities to develop their planning and mobilization capacities to respond to crisis. And especially public utility services to ensure these services are maintained or restored as quickly as possible. Peer-to-peer support mechanisms and the role of the municipalities within a country should be maximized in sharing good practice and resilience planning and design process. So Turkish municipalities are key partners for resource mobilization for those aims, and they have enhanced to get the tangible results. The second leg of
you have less than 2 minutes.
Okay, okay. Let me
just to
move
remind.
On. Okay, thank you very much. So, and when we go to our NGO framework, we see these critical 5 sectors: leadership and management of the representative bodies, and we invest in service delivery capacities, and also we want to engage simultaneous programming instead of sequential programming. Let me also quickly look at the 3 sectors, especially in the health sector. In this area of experience in Libya, Sudan, and Somalia and Palestine has shown that the initial emergency health interventions and medical camps at early stages have provided with specialized health services and now trains the medical human capital on the ground. And we improve the citizens' access through health equity. Another important pillar is the education, and we operationalize these through the vocational training. And we believe that the vocational training reduces barriers to enter to the profession, especially to address the lost generation syndrome, and we can create the demand for locally demanded skills and capabilities. And finally, I want to look at how can we get a transition from food aid to sustainable livelihoods. In line with our simultaneous programming, TICO encourages general food assistance and stabilization peace-building objectives. Then we invest in livelihoods, build strong linkages between states and citizens, to complement humanitarian companies. And finally, I want to give this the lessons learned and how can we deliver better. So the Nexus partners need to unpack the linkages between related areas of programming, especially in health, social protection, and livelihood programs to roll out in a coherent way. The second, the takeaway thought might be the Nexus partners need to support local governments as key entry points and sustain decentralization where it helps inclusion and long-term stability. And the third one, Nexus partners should be by investing in building skills of knowledge of their staff across specializations and bringing actors on board across disciplines. And finally, Nexus partners need to seek ways to find their own reform agendas for local engagement where possible and embedding risk and crisis sensitive approaches. Thank you very much. Sorry for exceeding my time, and over to you, Berna.
Thank you so much, and yeah, I think it's still very good on time, and also thanks for the content. And I think, I mean, this was really well prepared, and also especially with the lessons learned accumulated with Tika's experience. That's also very useful. Thank you, Emre Bey. So we will move forward, and I'm sure our audience will also have some questions or experiences to share. But without further ado, let me also move to the next speaker, Seher Alacacı Arıner, to share the 3RP is what we call the Regional Refugee and Resilience Plan. Seher is the Assistant Resident Representative in UNDP Turkey for long, and she actually has a lot of experience in socioeconomic and political reforms in Turkey, as well as governance actions. So, so this is related to the very long the long-standing crisis that Turkey had to grapple with, along with the countries of the region. So we believe that this is actually a very interesting instrument and mechanism to share. So without talking too much on this, I'm passing it on to you, Seher, for sharing and presenting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Berna. Distinguished participants, I also would like to welcome you on behalf of UNDP Turkey, and I'm very pleased to just present you today our just innovative platform, Regional Refugee and Resilience Plan, and how we just adopt this Humanitarian Development and Peace Nexus mechanism in the context of Turkey. As you know, you may know that 3RP is a regional coordination system, and it brings together the 5 countries hosting the Syrian refugees. They are Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. And they work with a link to the Syria crisis response in order to just provide durable solutions. And 3RP is developed and implemented in a very inclusive manner with both humanitarian and development actors, including UN agencies, NGOs, international NGOs, donors, and IFIs. We say that it's an inclusive platform, and inclusive platform for creating and strengthening the partnerships to leverage resources in support of the refugee response by working together in a much transparent, respectful, complementary, and mutually beneficial way. It is indeed, only possible by joining forces and working together in this innovative platform that we create differences in our responses in the lives of the affected individuals and also the host communities to continue building resilience capacities at both local and national levels. This is a holistic and state-led plan which helps to implement the vision of Global Compact on Refugees, designed to promote burden and responsibility sharing with a view to easing pressure on host communities and also enhancing the refugee self-resilience and expand access to the third country solutions. And 3RP performs in 3 key functions. We call it strategy, coordination, and resource mobilization. It is developed through a consultative process. As I mentioned, it's an inclusive platform and involves national and local governments, civil society organizations, UN organizations, donors, IFIs, and also the private sector, which is increasingly becoming a development actor, especially in the context of Turkey. It is closely aligned with global and national policies on humanitarian development and peace. And I will just mention in detail the Turkish experience, but in terms of its just global linkage, it has, I can say that it has close linkages with the global.
We lost you. You muted yourself, I think. You seem to be muted.
Let me see. I didn't mute, but
okay.
Something happened. So,
yeah.
Okay, let me start.
Perfect. Now we hear.
Okay, thank you very much. And as I said, it has close linkages with the global policies, especially in line with the multi-sectoral approach of Global Compact on Refugees. The 3RP seeks to increase linkages and maximize complementarity, including with the development actors and international financial institutions, and it has important interactions between and across 3RP sectors. It has 6 sectors. I will just explain it in detail, which addresses the refugee, humanitarian, resilience and development pillars. For instance, we are just having joint assessments, referral systems, joint programming between the UN agencies, which just reflects this intersectoral approach between and across 3RP sectors. It's a 2-year plan, and it seeks for multi-year funding, which is, we believe, that very essential for resilience building, and it's a very innovative aspect of 3RP as well. When we come to Turkey, it is, I would like to reiterate that the refugee response led by the Turkish government and the support provided by the 3RP continues to stand out as a global example of best practices, which is aligned with, as I mentioned, the Global Compact on Refugees and resilience-based development approach in protracted crisis situations. In Turkey, as also Emre Bey mentioned, 3.65 million Syrians under temporary protection lives, and approximately there are 320,000 international protection applicants and status holders living in, and it has huge impacts on the livelihoods of the host communities, and also there is a huge burden on the functioning of the relevant local and national institutions. And the scale of the needs in Turkey remains undiminished, and somehow it also been increased as a result of the socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19 in Turkey. In that respect, I also would like to highlight the strong leadership demonstrated by the Turkish government in the response and the generosity of the donors, which have proven to be key on the ongoing success of 3RP since its establishment phase. And in Turkey, we really, as I mentioned, give a huge emphasis on the partnerships, and the 3RP takes account other actors like, IFIs, which is a little bit different to other countries' experiences, which supports the government of Turkey to address the evolving needs of the refugees and the host communities. And based on the feedback received through consultations, 3RP includes much more emphasis on social cohesion and harmonization in the context of Turkey, which is both as a cross-cutting theme and also a strategic priority. In line with the multi-sectoral approach of the Global Compact on Refugees, as I mentioned earlier, it also seeks to increase the linkages and maximize the complementarities. I would like to mention briefly the strategic objectives of 3RP. It has three strategic objectives. The first one is contribution to the protection of Syrians under temporary protection and persons under international protection. And the second one is the promotion of inclusion, access to services, including health, education, social services, as well as the municipal services and local solutions. And thirdly, promotion of harmonization, self-reliance, and solutions. In that respect, I would like to just mention a little bit about local solutions, what we mean by local solutions. Everybody also highlighted very strongly the role of the municipalities. So local solutions in our in our work, we try to adopt a specific area of focus and local integrated approaches that includes all relevant local stakeholders. These include municipalities, private sector, chambers of commerce, civil society, host community, and refugees. And we discuss all together the issues, the current issues and the challenges, and elaborate the solutions accordingly. So the local solutions produced by the local stakeholders, we believe that are much on the ground and easier to get implemented. As you see that, I would like to just show the strong strategic and coordination mechanism of 3RP in 6 sectors and also subsectors and at national and subnational and regional levels, including Istanbul, Gaziantep, and Ankara, the big cities. The slide shows the geographical distribution and for the implementation of 3RP. Which is, which is at some point, just expanded its scope in 2021. There are national actors such as educations, registration, which are implemented at a national level, but some sectors have much more focused and targeted interventions in areas which are hosting the largest number of the refugees, including in the southeast regions, is seen here, and also in Istanbul, the city which also hosts a considerable number of the refugees. And I would like to just mention about the key principles that we adopted in the implementation of the 3RP in Turkey and also which is applicable in other countries. We prioritize support, assistance, and service delivery through the state organizations. And we try to just provide targeted and complementary support where the demand in services exceeds the availability and promote a strategy to integrate into the national services. Support to outreach activities is very critical to raise awareness and connect people in need to available services and strengthen referrals between the service providers and also building institutional capacities to follow up on the referrals. As I mentioned, we focus on 2 years planning, multi-year strategy, and with funding needs. And partners will undertake a quality review in late this year and update the 2022 plans later this year again, which is also very critical to have a tailor-made planning for the coming years. We adopt an inclusive approach, as I mentioned, with a regional 3RP focus on Syria response and a country plan that includes other nationalities in need of international protection and assistance in Turkey. We mainstream protection, age, gender, environment, as well as the prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse issues in all 6 sectors. And we address with targeted actions focusing on specific vulnerabilities of women and girls across all sectors that I mentioned. And COVID-19 is our reality. We try to just realize and also assess the impacts of COVID-19 in all the sectors we are working. And we also
I think we need to wrap up. It's actually
I will. I'm having it. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Berna. We are also promoting a multi-stakeholder approach, and also we try to just ensure complementarity in all the sectors, both humanitarian and also the resilience development pillars in order to enhance the impacts that we are having. Evidence-based programming is really important. 3RP is an important platform that also collects data, on both the livelihoods and other related needs of the refugees and also host communities. And we try to promote evidence-based policymaking and programming in this regard. And as you see that, the partners and funding, we have UN agency and NGO partners. As you see that, mostly, although in the context of Turkey, the resilience becomes the need at the local level, it is really underfunded. And also, the donors' vibrant interest is still on the humanitarian side. And this graph also shows the refugee and resilience budget, the funding. And it seems that, in protection, it is the refugee pillar is the highest one, education, the resilience just becomes in. But when we also assess the overall budgeting, although there is an agreement on the importance of resilience building and programming, the funding of resilience is still not sufficient, and also it is underfunded. And I would like to just complete my presentation to provide some recommendations, on humanitarian development, peace, and resilience-based interventions based on our experience in 3RP. And we believe that it is very important to focus on building resilience capacities at individual, community, and institutional levels, whenever possible, combining all three in multidimensional interventions. Making long-term commitments and strategic plans is key. And building resilience is a long-term development-oriented process which requires the sustained commitment of all relevant actors, humanitarian and development actors. Considering the humanitarian and development aspects of the response as an integrated whole, and also making the effort to communicate across sectoral and agency boundaries and engage in a collective exploration of responses. Humanitarian and development programs must be integrated to build the resilience of both displaced populations and impacted communities at the local level. Increasing the support for multi-year programming is critical, with flexible financing from both humanitarian and development budgets for resilience programs. And it is substantially, important that, the interventions that strengthen the agency of women and youth should be on the front, in order to ensure that we leave no one behind. And this it should become a cross-cutting component of all interventions in Turkey and also in other contexts, crisis contexts. And engagement in the three durable solutions, I mean the local inclusion, integration, and resettlement and returns, is very critical. We need to have a holistic approach, and we need to just invest in livelihood and education to reinforce the present and build on the future interventions in the area. Integrating interventions at the local and subnational levels, I mean the localization agenda, should be upfront, including systematically expanding area-based integration programs with certain elements of livelihood programming, strengthening local government services, social cohesion, and as well as education. We need to be better support existing initiatives and not creating parallel systems. There is one system, and whatever we are doing in the humanitarian or resilience field, it needs to be integrated into the existing systems. And we need to just consistently strengthen the national coordination and also the specific roles of the national ministries to support the sub-national integration programs. So this is, I think, a key for success of all humanitarian development and peace-related interventions. I would like to just stop in here. Sorry for taking much time, and thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to respond to your questions, if any. Thank you very much. Over to you, Berna.
Thank you, Seher. Indeed, the 3RP actually has been a process which made us learn a lot, actually, and the whole development and humanitarian community. So there's indeed a lot to share, I guess. So I'll move now to our next speaker, Hidehiko Furumoto from JICA. So Mr. Furumoto is a senior partnerships officer at the Office for Global Issues and Development Partnership in JICA's Office for Peace Building. And he's actually a secondee from UNHCR to enhance collaboration between JICA and UNHCR. So he's also very well placed to make remarks and share his experience on the Nexus. So without further ado, let me pass it on to Hidehiko. And yeah, I think, yes, the presentation is also ready. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, hello, good morning and good afternoon. Thank you very much. From my side, I would like to present JICA's peace building approach and the HDP Nexus approaches. But for the first several slides, I will go very quick just to introduce what is JICA, what is JICA peace building, etc. So this is the second slide about JICA. Actually, this is many of JICA staff's experience, but whenever we talk with various donors or ODA assistance country, sometimes there are some sort of the misunderstanding that JICA is a funding financial agency, but JICA actually conduct various assistance starting from the technical cooperation and grant, disaster relief, research, etc. So next slide, please. So this is the human security concept and peace building of JICA. JICA and the Japanese government is holding human security approach as the core of its ODA assistance to the developing countries. So this is JICA's core mission. And peace building approach is also based on the human security approaches, which is combining the protection, top-down, and empowerment bottom-up approaches. So putting the people in the center of the assistance is JICA's core way to deliver the assistance to the field. So next, please. And this slide basically shows the relationship between the government and residents, I mean the people, and how do we approach the human security concept. Basically, the JICA is trying to build a resilient state by fostering public trust and empowering the society. So this this diagram basically shows that the government is to provide inclusive, fair, and functional service delivery to the people, and then people will provide the trust to the government, which will inevitably, I mean, eventually form the resilient state. This is a basic way of thinking for the JICA's peace building. Next, please. And this chart basically shows the time frame of the forced displacement. Forced displacement started and protracted displacement continues, and the repatriation, reintegration will happen. So JICA's, this slide basically shows that the JICA is working on the these three phases in the various activities. First, for the refugee hosting country, we provide a capacity building, infrastructure support, and human resource development, self-reliance to refugees. We also work for the fragile and in conflict countries as well. And when the repatriation, reintegration happens, we work for the countries and regions in transition to peace and stability. Next, please. So this is JICA's initiative on peace building. Basically, we have three categories: capacity building of local governance under the conflict-affected areas, and HDP Nexus responses to the refugees IDP hosting countries, and the responses to the conflict-induced challenges. So we are basically in today's presentation. I would like to talk mainly about this second point. But the JICA's Nexus approach is basically to support capacity of the country community in hosting displaced persons and improving living conditions and support to voluntary repatriation. But basically, JICA's approach is to work through the coordination with other actors and to seek the complementarity with other partners. In this slide, I'd like to share with you a little bit of the side story. But for example, at this moment in the OECD DAC, there is an INCAF group, International Network on the Conflict and Fragility. In this network group, we are currently discussing what actually means by HDP Nexus. And we basically agree at this moment that there is no common understanding what the Nexus means. For example, mostly UN agency, but we sometimes talk about a joint assessment, joint programming, and joint implementation, and basically trying to deliver the assistance by one actor. And we sometimes talk about the coordination and complementarity. So what actually does it mean by the Nexus? From the JICA's approach is basically to coordinate with humanitarian actors and development actors, and trying to fill the gap of the assistance that we find at the local level. So this is how we see the Nexus approach at this moment. And especially from the donor countries' perspective, this coordination and complementarity approach is very much crucial. That's what we feel at this moment. So next, please. And next. So from this part, I would like to show you two cases of the JICA assistance. One is in Uganda and another is in Zambia. So in the Uganda, JICA has been providing the peace building assistance to the northern Uganda for several years. In the Acholi region in the north, JICA started assistance since 2009. And that region was in the transition to peace and stability. And JICA provided local capacity, local government capacity building, followed by the humanitarian assistance conducted by the other agencies. In the West Nile sub-region, is basically affected quite much heavily by refugee influx rather than the IDP situation in the Acholi region. So the West Nile situation, the JICA conducted assistance since 2016, and basically in this situation, development assistance and humanitarian assistance were ongoing together simultaneously. And again, JICA is providing the support to the local host government, and also providing the infrastructure support and coordination and collaboration with other actors. For example, there are two examples of the Nexus. The one is collaboration with the UNHCR. JICA is conducting agricultural rice cultivation training for the host local people, and the UNHCR brings the refugee people to the JICA's training so that the refugees are also benefiting from the JICA's agricultural training, so that the UNHCR's humanitarian assistance, livelihood assistance, and the JICA's livelihood development style assistance can come together. Also, from the JICA's local government capacity building project, the local government came up with several priorities for the development plan. And such kind of the local government development plan were later covered by World Bank's Dr. Deep program and received the funding. So these are the some of the example of the Nexus approach in the Uganda case from JICA's perspective. Next slide, please. Just a moment.
Jacob, we will have to wrap up.
Yes, okay, sure.
In
okay.
1 or 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, so this is Zambia's example. In Zambia, UNHCR has been conducting the support for the former refugees to locally integrate in the Zambia society and in the Zambia countryside. This program was later taken over by the UNDP and the Zambia government to further promote the local integration of the former refugees from the development approach. So JICA is providing support to the latter UNDP's approach and supporting the Zambia government Department of the Resettlement through sending the expert to the Department of Resettlement of the government of Zambia, and also providing technical assistance for the Zambia government to come up with a better planning and implementation of the resettlement program, and to pilot the livelihood project. So the next slide, please. So this is the last slide, but basically there are three cases from the Uganda and Zambia. The first one is that JICA filled the gap of the humanitarian assistance by bringing in the development assistance to the actually IDP situation. And the second case is in the Uganda, as I mentioned, in the West Nile region, humanitarian assistance and development assistance were ongoing side by side, and JICA came in as a development assistance to better coordinate with the humanitarian assistance to support both refugee settlement and host community. And the third case is humanitarian assistance, the local government, local integration approach conducted by the humanitarian assistance was taken over by the local integration approach of the development assistance, and JICA supported the latter case to achieve the sustainable resettlement of former refugees. Okay, so thank you very much. This is all from my side.
Thank you very much, Hidoko, and this was also a very relevant experience coming from you. We have some delay in the program, but we still have time for questions and answers. So without further delay, let me pass it on now to Raman Kumar from Oxfam Iraq. So he's an international humanitarian practitioner with over 16 years of experience in humanitarian development and peace programming. And he is facilitating partnerships and local humanitarian leadership. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Raman to hear from Oxfam's experience in local action and local humanitarian leadership. Over to you, Raman.
Thank you, Varna. I hope you can see my screen and hear me well. Okay, so thanks to all the other colleagues who have shared their experiences on SDP Nexus programming and such. I would be focusing on how we have learned, what we have learned in the Nexus programming and integrating the local humanitarian leadership in Nexus programming in Iraq. Particularly the key learnings, if you see, we understand that the local actors who are based on ground, particularly the women rights organizations, women-led organizations, they are able to play a key role in social cohesion, peace building, and durable solutions. And another key area that we see is the flexible funding, the importance of flexible funding at country offices. It strengthens the coherence and complementarity across humanitarian development and peace programming. And it helps to move from one area to another area easily without any silos. Third is about the in-depth coverage rather than going on the breadth of humanitarian needs, doing part of WAS program at one place, part of food security program at another place. Rather than this, we try to understand how a depth of program in a same population, in a same community will be helpful in linking humanitarian development and in long run peace programming. And this is how we are trying to do it in Iraq. Another key area is that we understand from our experience that rather than capacity building, we try to focus on more capacity strengthening or capacity sharing. It is to be understood that with whom we are working, the local organizations or the communities, they are not at a stage where they don't have any capacity. We have to acknowledge their own existing capacities, and then we start from there. We are not starting from scratch. So we share capacities, we exchange capacities, what we have, what they have, and together we aim what is needed to deliver on a quality humanitarian development and peace programming for a durable solution. And another key area is the application of principles of partnership. We do have principles of partnership, which was adopted by the Global Humanitarian Platform in 2007. But when we apply it in principle, then it becomes more equitable partnering for the local actors and local organizations with whom we work. I would share a couple of examples. If you see the key areas that include fraud and corruption, capacity gaps, or high competition, high attrition are the key areas. In terms of fraud and corruption, what we try to do is we do an integrity assessment, including safeguarding, fraud, corruption, and aid diversion assessments, identifying the individual capacity gaps and build systems and institutional capacities of the local actors accordingly. And I would also like to mention, we are working in Iraq since 2015 after the ISIS era. And out of our cumulative 50 partnerships with local organizations, 3 cases were identified with fraud and corruption. And we are not immune, actually. So out of them, 2 partnerships were stopped. And with one, we learned a different modality. What happened is that the 2 organizations where the partnership was stopped, their leadership was not involved. They were not interested or not willing to enhance their processes or systems, whereas the other organization, which was a women's rights organization, and the issue of corruption was involved at the staff level. So our engagement with them was to strengthen the systems and practices and policies so that they are able to deliver better programming. And now they are one of our best partners in durable solutions and peace programming. We also work on developing an NGO charter of accountability, where the local NGOs have come together. More than 50 organizations are coming together to agree on a common accountability charter, and they are going to endorse it. This is not a completed work so far, and once this is done, they will be presenting it to donors and INGOs. In capacity gaps is what we understand that every organization may have different needs. And for that, we do an in-depth assessment with the organization. We identify specific needs, and then we share and exchange capacity jointly. We also understand that it is beyond training. Training is not the only means to build or share capacities, but we focus more on coaching, mentoring, secondment, exposure opportunities, and such, which are all tailored as per the need of the local organization. And then we also support in proposals, review processes, documentations, and such. Recently, we implemented a 3-year program on local capacity, and this was supported by SIDA, and 15 partner organizations were involved into this. The 3 core areas included capacity strengthening, and then another was cash for capacity, where 15 organizations were provided some small amount of capacity grant, which they used as per their own need. So every organization came up with their own specific requirement and need. And then at the end, you see 7 NGOs developed their policies, SOPs, manuals, 6 developed accounting systems, 3 developed websites, and such. And then at the end, there was an independent evaluation conducted, and 70% of NGOs were able to diversify their funding and partnerships as the result of this intervention. And 2 organizations were able to win social enterprise seed fund grants also. There is other issue of high attrition. The local organizations, if the staff are more experienced and trained, they move to other organizations, other INGOs, which is also somewhere our charter for change commitment, that we should not be undermining local capacity. So looking at INGOs and our commitment need to be better on that. There is high competition among the local NGOs. They rarely wish to come together as their own consortium in Iraq, and we are still working on these issues. What we see is that when we look at power in the sector, it starts from mostly financial and decision-making and technical capacity, which is mostly understood as to be present at the donors, United Nations, and INGOs level. And we often miss on the power of the local organizations who have more knowledge, more own experience of living with the context and their local networks and such. And then if you see the women's rights organizations, women-led organizations are inherently capacitated on peace and social cohesion processes. We also need to understand that how the existing system may be possibly transformed into a nexus programming. If you see the local organizations and the international actors, possibly they are not here to compete with each other, but to recognize and complement each other's strength, and to make sure that there is a system that delivers quality and principled humanitarian development and peace program, and which is inclusive, agile, diverse, accountable, and sustainable with all together. Another key area is that when we learn from our practice, the practice starts from communities. We learn from communities, local NGOs, which goes to international NGOs and nations and donors. And but the major policy shift comes from the donors level, where the power, mostly the power of money comes in, or decisions comes in. So donors have a key role to support in policy changes. Another, I would come to the key point where I would share how the funding has become an enabler, or if not appropriately used, how it hinders or blocks the changes. If you see, the funders have influence and huge role in transforming the system. What is possible, as I see from the other colleagues, that the flexible funding modalities, there should be a seamless transition possible between humanitarian development and peace programming. There should be also adequate funding available for development interventions which support the democratic and accountable state building in fragile states, particularly where we are sitting, particularly in Iraq. There are a couple of other examples from other states. And then we should be able to match and merge the humanitarian and development funding streams. There are few donors who fund humanitarian program, few donors who fund development program, but how do we merge these two together? And then how do we increase the influencing capacities of national and local organizations and support their networks and consortia? There is also something that the donors possibly could do, is having a policy that the grantees must have a minimum number of joint programs with local organizations, the local and national humanitarian actors, to be eligible for funding. And also possibly part of your funding, percent of your funding may be reserved specifically for the local organizations particularly. You see, there is another key area is to remove barriers for funding processes for local organizations, which may in terms of allowing the local organizations to submit the proposals in shorter versions or simpler versions, and also possibly in local languages. And then possibly trying to fund directly to local organizations, including women rights organizations, women-led organizations, with the funding which is flexible to move across different lines, and also to having multi-year and to be planned with the local communities. And the last and important recommendation or suggestion is to possibly provide overhead cost and institutional cost recovery in the grants. And also, if it is going with the grantees, possibly asking them that they pass these overheads and ICRs down to the local partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Raman. Thanks a lot for this perspective, again, coming from Oxfam and actually an implementer in the field with direct implementation experience. And also thanking for you to also keeping up to the time. So we have some time left for the Q&A session as discussed. So I'm checking the chat part to see if there are any questions. But I don't see any questions, but now it's open for questions and comments and experience sharing. So for the audience. So I'm checking now if there's any questions there. Okay, so I actually let me I received actually a question on, unless we have some others, I received a question about the challenges of working with national actors in countries where the state is involved. I mean, when there's violence and conflict in the countries that we're working in. So how you overcome the challenges of working with national actors and engaging with them. So I think this actually is a question which is relevant to almost all of the speakers that we heard from working in conflict settings. So let me open it up with this question. I mean, how you overcome challenges in engaging with the national actors. Any colleagues, maybe Hideyuko, it could be for you, or Emre Bey, maybe we can start with you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mena. For this question, of course, sometimes the neutrality, being neutral in this kind of the ongoing conflict situation can be a handicap for, especially for the NGOs, because the humanitarian principles always prioritize being neutral on the side of the conflict. But as I focused in my presentation, when we focus on delivery on essential services like health, like the livelihoods and education, actually that creates a trust even between the conflict parties. Maybe I can share one example from Afghanistan, that we to sustain to support the sustainable livelihoods, TICA has established storage facilities in different parts of the conflict zones. But even the size of the conflict respected these institutions, these essential support, and these like besides the hospitals and the education institutions, the storage facilities also was preserved and respected by the warring parties. So I think the key is here is to establish trust mechanisms, and of course to respect. When we are talking about the silos approach, of course we need to respect each institutions, each the mandates of these partners without attacking the basis. Of course, the humanitarian partners and the development partners and also peace building missions have different mandates to establish peace. But I think that trust mechanisms and ongoing the interaction and the keeping the channels of communication open is the key in the situations. But of course, we have to take precautions to the safety of the staff, humanitarian staff, and the development staff working on the ground. Yes, over to you. Maybe that can answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other response from the speakers? Hideyuko, I see you unmuted yourself.
Yes. Hello. Yes. Actually, I think this question can be interpreted in a little bit different ways depending on the humanitarian actors or development actors. For example, from the JICA's perspective, JICA always work with the national government partners, be it local government or central government. So the partnership, I mean, the working together with the national actor is sort of the prerequisite. So, for example, in a JICA's project in Darfur, for example, local people's trust to the government was quite much low at the beginning. So the JICA, but still JICA needs to work through the local government. So in that case, we dispatched many Japanese experts to the field to work with the local government to how better they can deliver the service, I mean the public service to the people, and how can the local government officials can communicate with the local peoples in a better way, in a transparent manner, so that the delivery, I mean the assistance delivery can be perceived as a positive action from the local government to the people. So this is basically the JICA's approach in terms of the challenges to engaging in the national actors. But from the humanitarian actors' point of view, certainly the engaging in the national actors sometimes are challenges, and especially the communication. I mean, the close communication is really a key. For example, from the UNHCR standpoint, if I may talk from the UNHCR's perspective, UNHCR's protection mandate for the people and local government, how do you say, perception sometimes may conflict with each other. But from the UNHCR humanitarian actors' point of view, we would like to really seek the understanding about why our action is important, because of what kind of idea what kind of the perspective it is important, and I think it is really a close communication to seek the understanding from the local actors so that we can be operational in the field. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Seher, I think you have few
Yeah.
points to add.
Yeah, Turkey has a specific context. In fact, you know, Turkey is not a crisis country, but crisis-affected country. And in terms of provision of the basic services, you know, it is really advanced, and the national government also put forward several measures to ensure that the Syrians have equal access to the basic needs. But I would like to just highlight the role of the municipalities. You know, it is, I think, very critical. Even though we don't consider municipalities as humanitarian actors, from the very beginning of the Syria crisis, they have served as the first response offices, especially in terms of the basic needs. And there's then also an interactive relation between the development actors and humanitarian actors through the municipalities. And it can be through the provision of language trainings, vocational courses, as well as initiatives that serves for social cohesion. And I also would like to underline the fact that, you know, the importance of social cohesion in humanitarian development peace nexus. And we also need to invest on it. This is not a thing that we can change from night to day, but, you know, it needs to be built on for long-term development efforts. And municipalities in that respect can play a great role, in my opinion. I can respond to the question from this perspective, Berna.
Thanks a lot. So it's indeed, I think, I mean, all the partners have some ways to engage in difficult conflict settings. I mean, starting with aligning with the national counterparts from the onset, engaging with the local actors, with the municipalities, creating and ensuring ways to build trust through different mechanisms. So these are all ways to engage and interact with the national partners. I don't know if there is anything that you would like to add, Rahman, on your side.
Yes, an important aspect as the organization working on the ground, security and access challenges in a conflict setting becomes very crucial. Recently, in the last month, if you might have noticed, one of our colleagues from Yemen program, he and the Oxfam driver was caught in the crossfire, and they both of them could not survive. So you see, challenges at the ground level, at implementation level, are quite different. This is security is one concern. Access, permission letters to cross from one geography to another geography, it is another concern. We do some of the work ourselves, and we do some of the work with our local organizations. And at times, those organizations or us, sometimes we don't get access permissions from one place to another place. So these are the key issues at the ground level, travel restrictions, and often the international colleagues' visa issues. So these are the issues that we may experience often, and we try to deal with them at different levels and improve our security processes and policies. And but challenges are there.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, it's in the conflict settings, this even mobility and very basic operations that are handled much easier in other settings is increasingly becoming an issue. I think I have, yeah, I have Kübra, if there's no hands up. Kübra with a question, I think. Over to you, Kübra.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the panelists, there has been an increasing funding towards the humanitarian actors and sectors, but the OECD data also shows that the donors actually dropped significant aid towards targeting the development activities in those crisis affected countries. So my question is, how do you actually work with donors to work their risk averse plans, or how do you actually get them to engage in those countries where they actually need the most help and they are actually left with inefficient funds to work on their development goals? Thank you.
And this is addressed to, are you addressing this to all speakers or any specific colleague?
Whoever wants to jump in.
Maybe we can start.
I can.
Yeah, Seher is
Yeah.
unmuted.
Thank you, Kibra. It's a very important question. So we are also, as I mentioned in my presentation, even though the importance of resilience building and development is increasing in humanitarian development and peace nexus, the funding for resilience is still not adequate, and it is really chronically underfunded, especially in 3RP, it shows. And we try to promote that the donors need to comply with the grants bargain and its commitments and the global compact on refugee principles to support the burden sharing and self-reliance of the refugees, which require flexible and long-term funding for the resilience-based interventions and resilience-based development approach. In Turkey, we try to do it through 3RP. 3RP is really important for us to get engaged with specific donors in the issue and to ensure and keep the vibrant interest of the donors in the field. And still, it seems that the needs are high in terms of the development, but it is still being underfunded. There should be a joint effort, both at national levels and global levels, to just ensure the vibrant interest of the donors in this field. From Turkey point of view, 3RP, that's why it's a very innovative platform. We do it. We also just time to time coming together with the donors to share the specific development related needs and how to have a holistic response to these issues. But there needs to be just a joint and common positioning in the field, which I believe that it should be also at different levels, at global levels, should be pursued. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seher. And maybe from other partners also to while making the allocations. Yes, please, Ideko.
Yes, hello. I think this is really a difficult question. And for example, from the JICA's point of view, the funding, I mean the volume of the financial packages available for each country is quite much, how do you say, binded by the Japanese MOFA, Japanese government strategy or policy priority per each country and per each region. And if I may talk from the UNHCR's point of view together, appealing to the global framework, for example, the World Humanitarian Summit or Global Compact on Refugees, it works to a certain extent, but it is not enough yet. I think we need to identify because each country have different priority, different policies, and different background. Why do they commit to certain global framework, and why do they not commit to certain framework? So we need to identify what is the reason behind for each country to approach to the areas. For example, in the Japanese case, in the Africa context, Japanese government is taking the TICA, the Tokyo International Conference for African Development. This is a 3 or 4 year cycle, quite much large event covering all African countries to illustrate the policy priority for coming years. This TICA conference is a very key milestone for African assistance. And in order to mobilize Japanese funding to the African countries, we try to connect certain countries' assistance to the TICAD context and the TICAD key discussion points so that we can mobilize funding. And also, for example, in the Southeast Asian context, Japanese government is holding the policy which is called free and open in the Pacific areas. It is called FOIP. So we try to connect our assistance approach to the Japanese government policy framework so that, if you bring the funding to these countries, this assistance, then this is quite much aligned with your government policy. That's why you need to support this. So this kind of approach to the donor countries, I think it is important. And I think we need to acknowledge that we need to think about this kind of way. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, the policy decisions are actually very much aligned to the foreign policies and the priorities of each donor, and there, I mean, there's need for some prioritization, obviously. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Any responses, Emre Bey or Raman?
Maybe also I can also intervene.
Please.
Although TICA implements the projects by its own budgets, also in our partnerships, we see that there is a threat for early exits, especially when before institutionalization of some of the key sectors like health, especially in also in education, the commitments sometimes will be overwhelming over and over for the demanding crisis. But the early exit can be undermined as early successes. So we want to keep the interest of our key partners, especially for the delivery of the services, and of course the humanitarian crises follow each other, and keeping the interest and the focus on some of the protracted problems might be a challenge for the flow of funding. But from our side, we want to highlight the negative impacts of the early exit, and so we want to maintain our commitments, especially for running the key services like hospitals, like the vocational training centers. At least the local capacity will take them over. So thank you very much. It's over to you.
Thank you, Emre Bey, also for this perspective. Anyone else to either share any reflection or any further questions from the floor? I don't see any hands up. Maybe we can slowly wrap up this session, reminding that we already shared a background note, and the recording will also be available online for those who haven't had a chance to join us. So let me wrap it up here then with huge thanks to TICA, our TICA colleagues, especially Emre Bey, you for preparing and this session. In addition to our, of course, our other speakers from UNDP Turkey, Seher Hidehupo from JICA, and Raman, again, for you for the reflections from the field, extremely valuable from the humanitarian angle as well. So as we close this, let me also move or give some information about how we plan to continue the learning series. As you know, we are coming to the summer period, so we will have some summer break in between, but we'll hope to join all of you again in September, mid-September, about 15th of September, with yet another learning session on communication and development cooperation. So that will also be, that's a point that a topic that we actually have a lot of interest from our audience, so that we believe that this will also be an important one. And we hope to keep contact for any topics that might be of interest for all of you. So we'll be in touch. And again, thanks a lot for all of you for participation and for all your contributions again to all of our speakers. So maybe we can all open our cameras to say, to show each other while bidding farewells. Thank you.